today we would like to talk a little bit about your experience as a pen and paper Dungeons and Dragons player. But before we start, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing outside of the fantasy realm of the Forgotten Realms?
So my name is Joe, as you were saying. I'm Irish. I'm a software engineer for a living, and I play the drums in a band in my spare time.
Nice.
And let me think. Usually, I'm used to being asked for like a fun fact at these times, so I'm very thankful that you're not asking me for a fun fact. But yeah.
Well, maybe that will come. Maybe later, after we had a beer. Well, thank you. So, tell us a little bit about, or what I'm wondering is, how did you kind of like start out playing D&D or pen and paper in general? What was your entry in this great hobby of ours?
I mean, it sort of started out like it does with many people. I knew somebody who liked it. You know, I had a friend who was into it, and he needed a few. So it's a very difficult game to play by yourself, so he started conscripting us, just for D&D 5e. You know, at least that's how it started. And we ran when I was in second year of college. I want to say we ran a quick game of Curse. I say quick game. We ran a game of Curse of Strahd over the course of a year or so, and all of us were pretty new to it. You know, it's not even he, the DM, like he was a good DM, but you could, if you asked him now, I'd say he probably had a few notes for his past self. You know, all of us were relatively new to it, except one or two people. So it was everybody kind of learning together and getting to grips with things. And I've pretty much been playing with that group to some extent since then, you know. So we all know each other real well. We all know our styles and things. But it did start out with this guy, like he wanted to get people into D&D 5e, so he'd have a group to play with, and it's spread out a fair bit since then. We've given Pathfinder a go. I've given Call of Cthulhu and Blades in the Dark a go as well myself. It's kind of just, I'm sure plenty of people have come across it the same way. You know somebody who likes it, so they introduce you, and then you're hooked.
Yeah, amazing. How many years are you doing that with those people then?
Not super long. I'd say 3 or 4 years now, tops.
Yeah.
I'd say 4 years at the most. I'm not a super experienced player myself, but I know the ins and outs.
Yeah. So do you play longer campaigns, or do you more like some short one shots, or what is kind of like the style of play that you guys are in?
With that group, we're currently in the middle of a sort of overarching, entirely homebrewed campaign. Actually, that's nice. The thing that I kind of like about it is, or at least that impresses me about it, is that the DM, the person who got me into the game, is homebrewed most, if not all, of this setting, and it's really cool. It's very creative, you know. But other than that, I do enjoy a good one shot. There was a bit of time over the lockdowns where we were all taking turns running one shots with the same group of characters. I suppose.
Nice.
So that was a lot of fun. I'm pretty sure none of those characters died either, so that's totally something we could come back to. But it's at the moment I'd be playing the big overarching game, because I like the idea of a character that kind of develops or grows. But you can't beat a good one shot, to be honest. Especially if you have a couple ideas you just want to try out and mess around with.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I wouldn't know. I'm not such a player. I don't play too much, very rarely. But so with that one shot that you just mentioned, how did it work out? So it's the same group, and then every time another person DM'd, or how did that work? How did that work actually?
I believe it wasn't like everybody in the group had a go at DMing, but it was the same sort. It was the same 4 or 5 of us. Like, I remember running or at least one game for this group, and I've only DM'd a couple of times myself, like 5 or 6 maybe. I'd need to think about it. But the fella, you mentioned your group's DM, aren't you?
Yes, correct. Yes.
Yeah. So the person that introduced me to D&D is the same. He's our group's DM. But in the chances where he gets to be a player, it's great. It's good to see because he knows so much about the game that you can there's some really creative stuff, things that I'd never even heard of or would have occurred to try.
Yes. Yeah.
So
But I must. Go ahead. Sorry.
just when somebody else runs a one shot like that, you get him a chance to be a player for a little while, and it's great to see.
Absolutely. So for me, it's so when I'm a player, and it's very really like in my whole DM career, it was maybe like 2-3 times. But I always try stuff of which I always felt like players kind of like miss out. I think those are kind of like the great things to use, but especially in D&D, there is a plethora of actions that everyone can do, right? Now, because, for instance, I don't know if you know Baldur's Gate 3 or played it, but a lot of players started to notice the shove action because it's a very powerful action. But the shove action actually exists also in pen and paper for a long time. And I was wondering, guys, you don't always need to look at your character's abilities. There's some standard abilities everyone actually could use. And that's always funny to see. But on the other side, I must say, and I must admit, that as a player, I always feel when I did, especially I remember when I did it the first time, it felt strange not to be behind the whale. Because it was very constraining, which is very different when you are behind the DM screen.
Yeah,
kind of like
you're right.
control.
Much more narrow, I suppose.
Yeah, so big respect to that as well. So, talking about the big campaign, tell us a little bit about your character in that one campaign that you're playing.
Yeah, sure thing. Character's name is Zarin Chant. He's a tiefling sorcerer.
Nice.
He's not level 5. He's about 500 XP away from being level 5 or 50, one of the two. The conceit I quite like about this campaign is that we can have multiple characters, but you can only run one at a time, and everyone starts at level 3. So you have to spend time with each character to level them up. But it does mean that the parties can be at least a little bit varied, like some level 4s and some level 3s, for example. And we recently kind of gotten a big combat encounter that left us a little the worse for wear. Some people had to make some new characters, and then one of the players actually has kind of taken a break. So at the moment, this Zarin fella is technically the most strongest person in the party, I suppose, which is terrifying for me because he's a sorcerer, he's a glass cannon. I heavy emphasis on the cannon though. Like I suppose he does a fair bit of damage, and he's a clockwork soul sorcerer, so you can kind of affect, the odds of things hitting.
Yes.
Get rid of advantages and things like that, which is nice. I did at the start kind of build the character around affecting probability. Like I gave him silvery barbs as well, for example. Just because I thought that was a strange idea for a fighting style. But now it's just kind of try not to die, I suppose, because I've gotten a little attached to the guy, and now we've seen proof that there's no the gloves are off. If you're going to die in a fight, our DM is not going to save you, which I respect.
No. Which is cool. So, next to your combat abilities, and I can really feel that you feel attached to him. Is there what kind of personality would you describe to him, or what did you thought about what the tiefling sorcerer is about?
I had in mind this fella that was just sort of curious or inquisitive almost to a fault. Like it would get him in trouble sometimes. Our DM had us writing sort of. He wanted us to think about what the characters were doing before they got into the campaign setting. And for this fella, I had envisioned him as sort of a private detective in this really busy but really isolated town. So he wasn't necessarily working for the police or anything like that, but he was usually catching bad guys, I suppose. And it was full on a case of like, I want to know what's going on here. And you get so curious about it that you put yourself in danger a little bit. So he did have to learn to fight, but it just, yourself sorcerers are kind of either born with these abilities or they get what would I suppose you'd say they received them at some point in their life. So he was more focused on fighting with magic than fighting with swords because, like, I don't know, maybe he had a bit of elitism in his head, but it's like anybody could swing a sword, but not everybody can shoot fire out of their hands. So I'm going to use that. Which is ironic because he can barely swing a sword. He's not a very strong guy,
No,
but,
doesn't seem like it.
yeah.
So, how did you? So what is kind of like his origin in terms of a sorcery source? So where does his power come from?
So how I had it in my head was that he's a very small kid, but born to two human parents as well. First tiefling in the bloodline, I suppose. He I maybe correct me if I'm wrong on my lore here, but as I understand it, the Clockwork Soul sorcerers get their power from one specific realm, right? Like the realm of order.
Yes, correct. That is actually correct. Yes.
And in this campaign, the world, the setting that things are in, I'm probably bastardizing the description my DM gave me, but how I understood it was that the realms, like elemental planes and just the plane of magic and stuff, are a lot closer to our plane than anywhere else in the world. So magic is stronger there, and there are more elementals roaming about. So I kind of took the same idea of planes overlapping, and I just had this at some point when the kid was like 3, the Mechanist or whatever the name of that plane is, and our plane just crossed over for like a half a second, and I think he must have been at the point where the planes crossed over. I just realized I covered up my camera there. He must have been at the point where the planes crossed over, and it was that kind of intersection, just sort of imbued him with the magic, with the ability to use magic. But it did also, in fairness, kill one of his parents, because you can't have a character without a tragic backstory in D&D. Not possible.
Why? Is that really so? Because for me, because that's interesting. A lot of people are always saying that, and I'm of the case that it can be pretty normal. I encourage sometimes players, especially now in the next campaign that we started, to really think a little bit of normal in the box, right? You don't need to be, parents need to be killed. You don't need to have amnesia, because the extraordinary is I always say the extraordinary is the adventure itself, where something extraordinary is happening. Because a lot of people or players that I play with, or even DMs, kind of like look for this, but you need to have some dramatic, dark secret background.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I feel they're a little bit different. Yeah.
I'll agree with you at least a little bit. I don't disagree with you at all, but I think that sometimes you get players who give their characters ridiculously elaborate backstories, and it's like they saved the world when they were 12 years old, and then they come into the campaign and they're level 1, and they'll miss an AC 13 attack. It's they kind of rub up against each other. Like, how can you be this historical, legendary warrior with 12 hit points? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I think I agree that at least the most interesting stuff to happen to your character should be the stuff that happens in the game.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, totally. And that's very interesting. So going, with your character a little bit further. So he's what you said, level 4, 5?
Level 4 at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, level 4. So you started all at level 3 or level 1?
Level 3.
Oh, so you only had a couple of sessions currently, right?
Admittedly, now we're probably 6 months or so into the game. We're just very bad at organizing, but we've had a fair few sessions. It's just that not all of it is combat related. There's a lot of exploration. and my DM has got mechanics in place for navigating the world. So, we could mess it up, we could get lost, and then whatever we're trying to do, we end up somewhere else. And then obviously there's encounters on the way to wherever you're going that might be fights.
Yeah.
I won't pretend to have full knowledge of the XP system in terms of like how much each fight would give you or anything like that. So I can't say for sure if we're leveling up quickly or slowly or anything to that effect. But
there are always rules out there, and encounters are weighted. So in the official rules, they're kind of like weighted. How much XP do you provide? Some DMs like myself work more in the boundaries of providing a level up depending on the story progression. So that's more my personal style. So it doesn't really matter. Everyone has their own style. Some people are really hardcore about those things. For me, it's and a lot of DMs. However, the table feels like and the DM feels like. It's interesting. Exploration. So is exploration something, the modes that you have in exploration? Because I always find it very interesting when you have a DM kind of like putting in a little bit of a different twist to exploration, giving it a little bit more a feel of mechanics to it. How do you feel about it? Is exploration something that you enjoy as a player, to just, go around, explore, or do you feel limited? How do you feel about those things when facing exploration in general?
So broadly speaking, like say if I were playing a video game or something, I wouldn't spend an awful lot of time exploring unless it were part of the point, I suppose, unless it were part of the game. And in D&D, I feel similarly, at least. I wouldn't, like there hasn't really been a point in this campaign where I've thought, hey, we have nothing to do, let's go walk around in circles for 8 hours. Because the setting that we're in is full of interesting things, but you are very much moving between the interesting things. It's not really, it's a bit too dangerous for the party to decide to just walk in one direction and see what happens. You wouldn't be sure you'd make it back in time, because just talking about the mechanics, we do have to eat food and drink water and sleep, and it's there's plenty of interesting stuff to find in the world, and we do stumble across things that are interesting. But that would be more looking for something specific. At least I personally wouldn't be in the habit of exploring for its own sake. But I don't feel limited by I suppose, the need to travel, because the DM has kind of made the very streamlined mechanics for getting around the world. You know what I mean? Especially now that we're used to them. It's very much like, yes, you do need to eat, but you can kind of, if you don't have enough rations, you can forage, and that only takes one person out of the navigation. It's very well thought out. So I don't really feel limited by it. It's more an ingredient in getting around.
Ask your DM if he has the system of the Angry DM blog, because it sounds very similar to the system of the Angry DM blog, which I use as well. It is one of the best exploration mechanics out there, because this guy, the Angry DM blog, I think it is, this guy has so many thoughts about how to DM, what mechanics use, what is a waste of time, because exploration has always been a nuisance. But I'm pretty sure, as far as you explain to me, foraging, navigation, you can do discoveries, and he probably does a rule, right? A 1d6 rules. Yeah, that's the Angry DM. That's the Angry DM system. This is an amazing system. I will put a link up, but this is one of the best exploration systems, because I was looking up, because it's very hard to get in. But it's good to hear from another player that essentially sees sense in it and enjoys it, because on one hand you want to provide a homebrew world and give it scope, but some randomness, because you don't want to flesh out everything. It's impossible for DM to flesh out a totally new world. You want to go where the players go. And in a hex map where players can go everywhere, it's kind of sometimes hard to find a system that is not too gamey. It feels a little bit more pen and papers like, and still make it kind of like random and engaging at the same time. And I think the Angry DM really made a good point, because I know a lot of DMs that found it are using it. That's really cool. Nice.
I'll ask about it. Absolutely, I'm curious now too.
Perfect. So, so, do you have any character in the time that you now have been being player for good 4 years that you would consider, kind of like your favorite overall and deeply fell in love with and put a lot of thought into it? Is there kind of like one character would you really pinpoint as one as such?
That is a good question. See, I one the thing with, I guess, these tabletop, the longer campaigns, is that one of my earliest interests, like when I was 10, when I was a real young kid, was writing prose. You know, so I'd this kind of character craft and what is this character's arc going to be, or what do they want out of life, and things like that. They've always been real interesting kind of questions for me to think about if I were like reading a book or watching a film. And then D&D 5e came along, and it's like, oh, you can then play as that character. You know, you can ask yourself that question about them and then go do it. So whenever I have to write a character for a campaign, or even if just for a one shot and I get carried away, I do tend to put an awful lot of thought into where they might go. I did make the early mistake with the Curse of Strahd campaign I mentioned earlier. I had a
Mhm.
whole kind of beginning, middle, and end in mind, and that was obviously a mistake because the game is too chaotic. You know, there's too many variables, and the player is not like, yeah, the players are the ones in control, but there's just so much going on that
Uh,
no individual player is in total control. You know,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
good. That's how it should be.
it should be. Yeah. When the
Yeah.
first time, when the first time read Curse of Strahd, before I thought to myself, Jesus Christ, there are so many variables. This is gonna be fun.
And as I mentioned before, we were relatively new players when we played Curse of Strahd. So once we finished the campaign, the DM came back around to us and was like, "You guys missed so much.
Yes. Yeah.
And I can't believe you didn't do this or forgot about this or what have you."
But that's most of the time the case. So how do you feel every time when how many times a week or how many times a month do you guys actually play?
We shoot for once a week, every Sunday we try to meet.
Nice.
Um, that doesn't always shake out, and when it does, we don't always have everybody. We did miss the last couple of sessions because there was a sort of we're all members of sort of this friend group from because we all went to college together, and a bunch of us went over abroad for a week and a bit, so that obviously disrupted the schedule a little bit. But yeah, we shoot for once a week, so I suppose 4 times a month, and it'd probably be closer to 3 times a month on average. Some weeks there's too few people to bother going ahead, or the DM isn't free and we couldn't do it anyway. That kind of thing.
Yeah, that's kind of like the typical thing going on. So
Mm-hmm.
so you just said something very interesting about creating characters. So before even playing pen and paper, you kind of like created in your mind or on paper kind of like characters. So is there a process that you go through? Is there some method that in your head going through to tell kind of like maybe for others to touch and inspire? How do you approach a new character?
Well, as I was saying earlier, I'd consider it a mistake to try to get their beginning, middle, and end sketched out in advance before you so much as touch a dice, because you have no idea what's going to happen to them. They might slip and hit their head in the first session and die. There's no, you've got to be flexible. So I think what I tried to do is get their personality down as best as I can.
What does that mean, the personality down?
So I'd said earlier that I think it's a mistake to get to decide on the beginning, middle, and end before you so much as start playing. Because you don't have any idea what's going to happen, and then your plan is just be completely different after a couple of sessions or something. For all anybody knows. So what I more try to think about like what are the personality traits of this character, I suppose. How do they behave in a crisis? How do they feel about people they don't already know? there's something I've heard called the shopping trolley test, where it's just like I'm sure if you're familiar,
Yes.
Whether somebody puts a trolley back in a supermarket car park when they're done with their shopping, because it costs you absolutely nothing, or it's just a little tiny bit of work, and not doing it doesn't really hurt anybody, but it is unquestionably the right thing to do. It's things like that. Like, what would they? Because obviously D&D 5e has its moral and, I guess, legal alignment chart. What would you call the other axis to that? Lawful, neutral, chaotic.
Alignments.
Yeah. The alignment chart, obviously, they try to codify it a little bit, or gamify it, even, because there are some items that you can't use if you're evil aligned or lawfully aligned or what have you.
Yeah.
So I do put a bit of thought into where they land on that scale, but ultimately it's more like, if this were a real person, how would they behave if they had to wait in line for 3 hours? How would they behave if somebody pulled a knife on them in an alleyway? Or how would they behave if they've been dating somebody for 5 years and then broke up with them, or something like that? Just a bunch of these little normal person questions.
Perfect.
And then you throw them in front of a bunch of dragons or something, and then you get to the more fantastical stuff, like what is their fighting style, what's their relationship with magic if they use it, how do they feel about governments, I guess, are they used to traveling, are they going to complain about having to camp, that kind of thing, because you won't really know what situations they get into, but if you can get their personality down, then it's a lot easier to decide on the spot and have it still feel like a real person.
That's fantastic. And I think that is something that because the thing is, of course, talking about the fantastical worlds that we're in, and everyone wants to be a hero, and it really doesn't matter. I don't want to say now that everyone needs to follow that suit, right? Everyone shall create their characters how they would like to, but it depends on preference and how the table is set. But on my table, I'm really also looking like to fleshing really out, because we play long-term campaigns. So the last campaign was 3 years. After a 2 months break, we started now the new one. We're already a couple of months again, and for me and my players, including, it is much more about fleshing characters out and having a personality, and that also means to really think about the structure and normal things. What food do I like? What do I drink?
Yeah.
Yeah, what pisses me off, and what brings me joy? Which card games do I play? Do I even play card games and stuff like that? And so, how do I react to other races? So that's a very interesting thing. You just mentioned something that I want to delve into before we go a little bit into more your approach of characters. Alignment. How do you feel as a player about alignment when creating a character?
So I haven't encountered a DM that was, I don't want to say weird about alignments, but I haven't really encountered many problems from DMs about alignment, I suppose. Like, none of the DMs I've ever played with have interrupted a decision I made in the middle of a game to say, you can't do that, you're lawful aligned, or anything like that. But on the other hand, it's not a super involved, like, I don't want to say vestigial, but it doesn't feel like the most important mechanic in D&D 5e. It's kind of just, it's there if you want to use it, but it's not central. It's not, I suppose I'd say I don't feel very strongly about it. It's a nice way of summing up somebody's, like, it's very, very short summary, but it's a nice way of summing up somebody's relationship with the world, I guess.
That's a good way. I did have to put it into 2
words.
That's a good way to. I never saw it that way, but that's actually a really good way to say it, because for me as a DM, it frustrates me completely, and it has frustrated me since I started with D&D 2e, because I understand that because it's very constraining sometimes, especially lawful good is one of the not favorite kind of like alignments for a lot of people not to play, because I know why. It's a difficult thing to get in. It's much easier to play chaotic good because that's kind of like how many of us approach life anyway, chaotic but still good. So we can relate to that. But the thing about that is that it doesn't allow you to think about. It's very constraining. Spells constrain you. There are spells that specifically target specific alignments, stuff like that. And I always felt like even if you play a paladin, you can't be defaulted to lawful good. It really depends on your god, on your deity, and what you really believe in. And that's the things that you should think about it. And that's the things that you should do. Because for me, for instance, as a good example, for instance, the goddess Shar in Forgotten Realms, she's considered to be an evil god, but commoners out there will probably still pray to her because she is the one that you probably pray to protect you in the night when you walk alone through the woods. She's an evil god to her deeds, but the commoner doesn't really know that. He maybe just heard, pray to her because she protects you in the night. And so I find this much more interesting to think about than because it's the same thing. We just to step in real world religion for a sec.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the Bible or everything else has parts of it that wants you to be good. I truly believe that. But at the same time, it depends on the person how is it executed, right? You can be still a bad person. Just because you go to church, you can still be an asshole. That's just how I feel about it. But that's interesting. Yes, I have encountered much more DMs, especially newer DMs that are very freeform. And Pathfinder 2E, with their newer version that has just come out, or newer version, a little bit an updated version of 2E, has just got rid of alignments, just completely got rid
altogether.
of it. They replace it with a different system that's much more open, that's much more applied to the way that people mostly create their characters today, and also a lot of masters apply the game style. That's interesting. So going from your personality, and I like it that you go personality first. You didn't talk about how does the person or your character look like. A lot of people think about how it looks. So what's your next step?
Which is, just to touch on the appearance thing for a second there, I've put a bit of thought, I tend to put a bit of thought into how the character looks, and then the game starts and it's immediately gone, because the tokens, if we play with tokens with our images on them, it's because we're playing online. So they're little tiny little circles off in about this much of the screen, maybe. That Curse of Strahd campaign, everybody had custom tokens made for their characters, and we even made it to the end of the game, and people didn't know what some of the characters looked like. Having spent like a year and a half playing that campaign, absolutely no idea. So it's something to think about, certainly, especially if, say, you're like in my setting, I'm a Levistus tiefling. I think it's blue skin, one way or another. It's not. You do get the odd bit of tieflings around. You do get, there are people that have seen tieflings before. It's not that you're that weird, but my party at the moment consists of a blue tiefling, a pink firbolg, a bugbear, and a wood elf. And, whatever style your hair is or what kind of clothes you wear may not really factor in terms of your appearance, but you do need to be aware of what that group of people is going to look like walking around a town.
Yeah, it's a problem, but it's also a problem for us masters. To be clear, in the beginning, when people would tell me that's their setup, I already see in my head that it's a problem in towns. But you forget so fast about it, because I would need some sort of a post-it on my master screen all the time. They look weird. Actually, people have questions.
Don't forget, yeah.
But you forget so fast about it. That's true. That's totally true. But it's nice. So
next step,
going from the outside. So where are you from the looks? Where are you going with it? But after you did the personality, what are you thinking when creating the character next?
I usually have some sort of conceit in mind like you can, the personality and the mechanics of the game should probably interact, but they're not really linked. One can't really get in the way of the other. Like, I'd like to play a paladin, but unfortunately I decided that this person was an atheist, so I can't, that kind of thing. And incidentally, playing an atheist in D&D 5e, where there are where gods are definitely real, interesting. I got to try that at some point. That would be really
Yes, that would
strange.
be really, really cool. Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Because I'm pretty sure it exists, and I would allow it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But anyway, I said the question of personality and the question of, I guess, class and subclass and things like that, I suppose they're connected, but I tend to take them separately. And once I have an idea of who the person is, I'll go into more like what they're doing, and that would be class and things.
That is interesting. Yeah.
Like I suppose backstory had come into it a bit as well at this point. If I hadn't any idea of backstory, I wouldn't have created a ranger who was a supermarket clerk in their past life. I mean, I might. That actually sounds kind of fun, but I tried to connect the two a little bit. Now that I say that out loud, that's another one I definitely want to play.
You should write those things down, Joe.
Yeah, God, actually.
You should really write those things down. It's recorded. So you'll find it again.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's recorded, so you find it again. Oh, so I find this very interesting. Always try to avoid say a lot. Many players that I have encountered and played with over the years, and obviously I'm not talking about newer players. That's a little bit different. But players that have played for a bit, like a year or two, they're always very heavy on which class am I going to go play. Yeah. And I find it very interesting that you approach it from a personality standpoint, and that you go to even an extent that you say, I'm not even thinking about the class at the moment, because I'm just thinking about who the person is. And then with its background, what it actually does. So are you kind of like totally free from when you look at all those classes and the personality and background that you have and look at the classes? Do you really choose the one that really you feel fits the picture, or do you have bias in the end still to go down a certain route? Let's say you always play fighter, or you always play some magical class. Do you have some bias, or are you really strict with yourself, or try to be strict with yourself going down that route?
I definitely wouldn't describe myself as strict, to be honest. There are some ideas that I just I want to try, but I don't have the context or the opportunity to try them. So I'll merge a personality idea with a class and background idea. I think I had an idea for, it's certainly not mine, just one that I came across, of a Warforged paladin who didn't carry two-hand fighting because his AC was just naturally high as hell. So it didn't carry a shield, that kind of thing. But then the backstory for that character ended up being sort of like a village protector, because it just sort of makes sense. Sort of a golem situation. This person was kind of lived in the town, but sort of protected it from beasts and attackers and stuff, mainly because he could. He was literally made of metal. Sometimes they work out like that, and sometimes you can pair them together. But if it doesn't, I won't be strict with myself, as you say. I'll just I'll figure something out, I suppose. Like if there's a particular subclass I want to try, I won't break a leg trying to make the personality pair perfectly with the subclass or with the background and stuff. It's just nice when it happens.
Yeah. Okay. So what does background involve for you then? After, background is such a huge word when people say, I create my background.
Yeah, there is. I don't know if it was introduced in one D&D or if this was something that already existed. The idea of completely custom backgrounds.
Yes.
Was that already in 5e?
Basically copied from Matt Mercer. In Wild Mounts, no. Matt Mercer copied probably from somewhere else. But when they released, I think it was already also in Tal'Dorei Reborn. I think I'm not quite sure. But I think the idea of having custom backgrounds where you can choose your food, family, rivals, stuff like that. In 5e world, I encountered that the first time with Wild Mounts. And then one D&D, I saw that too, that they do it. But I will definitely say cop it from Matt Mercer. Wizard of the Coast, cop it, Matt Mercer. But that is a really great way to create it as well, yeah.
Yeah. I'll admit, sometimes at most in the past, I'll have the list of backgrounds that you can use that give you the skills and the feat that nobody uses or that I've never seen used. Those serve as a nice kind of starting point if you do want to write a more detailed past for a character. Like the urchin background will give you the skills or whatever, but then you go from that to writing a story about somebody that's lived on the streets their entire life, that kind of thing. It's once you have the mechanics, it can be a nice starting point for writing, but I don't, they are separate questions again, like the writing side of the background and the mechanics side of the background.
Yes.
They kind of take them one at a time, I guess, because you can get as much of the backstory fleshed out as possible, but I tend to do it more for my own fun, because my DM is really good and he works in elements from the characters' backstories. There was one kind of side quest we went on that tied into one of the characters' backstories very directly, which I really thought was cool. But he, I think, is more an exception to the rule. Like in the past, a lot of campaigns I've been in, the backstory of each character, if it's even relevant at all, maybe gets mentioned once or twice. It's more for the player than for the setting, unless you've got a really good DM.
Yeah, definitely. It depends really how you approach it. And in my last campaign, I definitely woven in much more the backgrounds of the players, definitely.
Yeah, that's great.
Whereas this campaign, I completely told them already, I will actually not. Because I play, for instance, my campaigns play completely always since I restarted to be a master, only in Exandria, so the world of Critical Role. But we diverged completely after this campaign, so I built my own separate continent that has been discovered now. So the second campaign is all about this new vast continent in the world of Critical Role, but it's now mine, basically. Because the players have gone down the route. So what in my world, what is canon is season 1. But Vox Machina, for instance, doesn't exist anymore, and season 3 also does not exist. And everything that happened there, don't want to spoil, but every major event which was there is not part of our version of Exandria. It is the version that the players now created in these 3 years, and through their action, the next campaign with their new characters that they have no relations, because I forbid them to have no relation to their old character, because it's about 150 years later, and some of their characters are dead naturally, some are already dead, and some still live, but it is something like that, something in that direction that I do. And in this case, I really said, your backgrounds is for you. It has. I will not. I will definitely not use it, because for me, it creates just in their discussion with the group between them, they can discuss it, like, where are you from, what have you done in the past. It can be a role play moment, right? But it's not something that I will use to dampen the expectation. It really depends how, as a DM, you go about it. But you should tell them up front, because many players who play will create a background and expect that the DM is using it.
Yeah, you need to be very upfront with that. You're right. Because, I mean, like we were saying, the most interesting stuff. There's a piece of writing advice I saw in a video, and I don't think I could find the video again if you put a gun to my head, but the advice was something along the lines of, is this the most interesting thing that's happened to your character? And if it isn't, why aren't you showing us that? So it's like in the same vein of all the interesting stuff should happen to your D&D character in the game. Like the player should be involved in it. At least in my opinion, it's more interesting that way. So one way to make sure it's more likely that the interesting stuff happens in the game is if you don't have your player writing essays about how interesting their life was before the game started. If you just kind of focus on what they're doing now, it's probably you're much more likely to have all the interesting and cool stuff happen as a result of the players, right?
Yes, definitely. So in background terms, what do you default kind of like to what needs to be in there? Do you feel like what is for you as a player the minimum that you can relate to it, that it's something you can start with?
I suppose if any DM, I'm sure I don't need to explain this to you, will need to tell their players why the characters are where they are, what they're doing, what their goal is. You need a hook for a campaign or even for a one shot. And that's sort of a similar question, why are you here? I suppose, what are you doing? It's pretty much the only ingredient I think is completely necessary. Like, well, maybe not for other people, but it's the one question I want answered for a character I'll be playing. Some people don't know and they'll figure that out, and that's completely valid. It's just not something I'm very good at doing. I will wander aimlessly if I don't have even a vague goal in mind. I played a campaign that was set in the Underdark a year or two ago, and the goal was essentially to get out, But the problem with that idea was that everybody's goal, no matter how different the people were, or how, they might have disagreed on everything except the fact that they don't want to be in this hole anymore.
Yeah.
Everyone's goal was exactly the same.
Yeah.
But you do need. God, that's a good. I'm not sure I'm phrasing this very well. Just that's I think the only element of a background that I personally absolutely need, and then you can kind of play it by ear from there. Like if you think the campaign is going to be a lot more combat focused, maybe you don't need the intricacies of how this person thinks or their philosophies or whatever. And it's also a lot of fun to discover that stuff as you go. Learn your character might learn from other characters around them. The DM might reveal something about the setting and you have a new idea because of that. It's all very flexible. I suppose that's the point, right? The game
That's
being run and operated by real people.
Yeah.
Much more flexible, more organic, as you were saying earlier.
I found this very interesting. Is that something, your whole approach, you said you started very early before you even knew pen and paper existed with kind of like character creations in general, but all what you're saying is a lot of things that I don't encounter that often with a player. You play now 4 years, but I find it as a DM very interesting how you approach it. Maybe I'm wrong because I maybe didn't talk to my players enough how they approach it, but still, my experience, at least with that, tells me they have sometimes different priorities. Especially because he said something really important. The only thing that is necessary is why am I here? And that is a very interesting. It's like, I will steal that from you, definitely.
Yeah, by all means.
Because in some way or fashion, I will always say, of course, to the players, think about the motivation to the hook that I just told you, or how it started. Obviously, that's. But I like it how you phrased it. The only thing, why am I here? And that is such a good sentence to say it. That's really good. Copyrighted by Joe Clarke.
No, absolutely not. You can have that one for free. It's not even mine. I'm sure 100 people have had that idea.
I'm pretty sure. Yes.
Yeah, more like 1 million. But I'm not about to. I'm quite positive how I go about this isn't a normal way to go about it. I'd say I'm getting hung up on smaller aspects a little bit. It's just because, as I was saying earlier, I came at this from an angle of already enjoying writing prose, like writing stories. And I suppose, what is a story but the interaction of a bunch of characters, right? So you need to kind of have that, the personalities, you need to put thought into that sort of thing. And then I guess the skills just kind of transferred. Maybe not even skills, really. I'm not sure I'd use the word skill, but the interest, the priorities transferred over when I came around to pen and paper like that. And I'm not sure I would call it normal. I definitely not sure I'd recommend it to everybody, because, you know, everybody wants something different from their table game, you know.
Definitely.
But it has its strengths, I guess, you know.
Definitely.
Especially if you like the role play aspect of the game, the conversations and a little bit of acting and drama and all that noise. I can't act to save my life, but it's fun, you know, to have the conversations, I suppose. Especially if you're having, like, you know, a fight to the death is obviously quite high stakes, but if your DM can make a conversation with a government official or with the leader of a bunch of bandits or something high stakes, if they can make it feel important, they've done very well. You know what I mean? They've succeeded in something. In the campaign we're playing, my DM had a little town of people that, for plot reasons, did not want to be discovered by the existing, I guess, government is the word. They were trying not to be. Every single person in that town was hidden or hiding, I suppose. And when we found them, they initially wouldn't let us leave again, because you're just going to go tell them, obviously, you know, like you. And it was that was entirely a conversation. Like, there were threats of violence, but the conversation between our party and the heads of this town, you know, the people in charge, was tense as hell. You know, if you just play 5e because you like the fighting mechanics, then maybe it wouldn't have been as much fun. But we were having a great time, and it was really well done.
How did you talk about roleplay? How are you approaching it, or how difficult was that, or not difficult for you was that in the beginning for you, like, being exposed in a place with new players, with people that you might know or didn't know? In your case, you knew each other already a little bit, but still, it's a new place. How did you find security in that space?
I definitely think I didn't really get the hang of the roleplay side of the game until after I had got the hang of the rolling dice side of the game. I guess, you know, that definitely came second. But in the first campaign we ever played, everybody was essentially playing themselves, you know, that kind of way. That there was one fella who already had a bit of acting experience, so he was full on able to, you know, he had a voice that he put on when he was playing his character, and his face changed a little bit when he spoke as him. But everybody else was essentially playing themselves with maybe one or two little differences. So at that point, I think until I got more comfortable with the roleplay side of things, one thing I used to do was just imagine what the differences were between this character I'm playing and me. You know, like, if I'm playing a horrible person, if I'm playing somebody that's being really mean, because I'm kind of on the quieter side. I wouldn't be insulting people randomly, you know. But if I'm playing somebody that's like evil aligned or just very asocial, I just keep in mind that this person would probably be a lot more rude. You know what I mean? And then try to factor that into all my social interactions. Or if I'm playing a guy with experience being in military or something like that, I'll try to think, it's like, okay, I'd probably panic in a fight situation, but this guy knows what to do. This guy will have better instincts and reactions to things. You know, until I was more comfortable with the roleplay side of things, I tried to think about what the difference was between how I'd react and how they would react.
Nice.
I suppose.
So within that realm of role playing and fighting and everything, not every table has those moments. But did you ever experience on your table or for yourself emotional moments where it really touched you in a way as a player?
There was. Let me think. There was a couple of character deaths in our current campaign. I mentioned earlier that we got in a fight that took out a couple of people, and all of those players have sort of replaced their characters with backups or complete replacements or whatever. It sort of depends on the person. But between those deaths and the fact that one of the players has he's taken a break for the time being, so his characters survived the fight but just left for, so that our DM wouldn't be rolling an extra set of dice every combat. What this means is that now, out of the 5 original players at the start of the campaign, mine is the only character that's still there. And I think he had a little, on the same day, like in-game day as that fight, he had just a little depression session, I guess. He was just kind of sat there feeling alone, you know what I mean? And he was barely talking to people and everything like that. And I think that did kind of blend in a little bit with my own sadness about the characters dying, because both of the people at the table whose characters had died, they had kind of plans for them. They had backstory stuff they wanted to incorporate. I mentioned that or the town of people hiding.
Yes.
From that related very directly to one of the characters' backstories who died.
Oh.
So it was kind of a shame, and I think it, with the emotional moments, sometimes they can happen because you're so immersed in the game that you just kind of feel what the characters are feeling. But as well as that, sometimes it can happen because your emotions as a character mix with your emotions as a player, I guess. Like, yes, my character is sad about that, but also I'm sad about that. That's a real shame, or something like that. There was one moment in the Curse of Strahd campaign where my character's emotions and my personal emotions were completely different. Because, let me think. I think one of the random encounters with a hag or something like that I'm getting mixed up. Sorry. Somebody had mentioned their missing daughter, and then another random encounter said something about, if my DM hears this, he's going to kick my ass for misremembering this. But it's something like, essentially another person said that they had kidnapped a young girl and she was dead or something. And then when we went back and found the original person, one of our party members mentioned that the daughter had probably been killed or was dead, and the mother was so distraught that she took her own life over it. And then later on in the campaign, we met the daughter. So it was the characters were all like, "Oh my god, this is awful. The woman, she took her own life out of sadness, thinking the girl was dead, and she's right here. This is such a tragedy." And in real life, I and everyone else at the party were laughing our heads off at the player who had made the mistake, I suppose.
Yeah.
She was heartbroken. She was like, her character's emotions matched those of the player. She was sad and her character was sad. But everyone else was kind of like, I can't believe this happened. That's the worst. Like, it obviously wasn't a funny situation.
No, it's more
not, just
actually.
No, it's just it's more a meta sense of, I don't know how to describe it really. It's just, we were, when somebody makes a mistake and you kind of make jokes at their expense because they're already embarrassed. Let's make it, yeah. It was something along the same lines of, we just sort of, I don't think it would have happened as much if the player wasn't as upset. And truth be told, I wasn't really involved in the joke making, but it was this kind of, the disconnect between, in universe, this is so sad, but out of game, it's just messed up, an awful twist of fate, I guess.
Did the player feel bad? Did she feel bad, or did you notice, or was it all fine? Was that a difficult moment? Did they cause distress, or?
I don't think I'd go so far as to say distress, but she was upset. She as a person, as a player, did feel a little bit of guilt about it. So I think that does. I mentioned that we were all in that campaign essentially playing ourselves, but she was quite invested in her character. She was immersed. She was definitely not leaving anything on the table, so to speak. So when that happened, and it was like a consequence of her decision, our DM very deliberately played up the guilt a little bit, because I think he also kind of thought it was funny, not because the death was funny, but because the player's reaction was so involved. I think like it was nice to see that at that point in the game we were all so involved in it that you could have that kind of reaction. But yeah, she was very much her reaction to that was genuine, I would say. But I wouldn't say distress. It was more just kind of, she was upset about it.
But since you guys know each other for a bit, they kind of like, you kind of like still differentiated how to go about that situation without getting personal, because you know each other so good. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if we were at a table full of strangers and somebody started laughing about that situation, I think I would be a little bit off-put. It's I wouldn't be sure that they weren't just laughing at the tragedy, I guess.
Did you ever experience that? Did you ever experience such a situation that you were at a table that something such happened, and how did you deal with it?
Experience which? Sorry.
Did you experience such a situation where something, like another player, it became personal? There was some infighting going on. Did you ever experience that?
Yes.
On a meta level, how do you how did you deal with that as a player looking at it?
I don't. So the issue with this is that it was almost exclusively the same person causing these problems. So it's not that I have a lot of experience dealing with different situations. It was more that just one person kind of, I don't know, not the biggest of team players.
Details to reveal
I guess.
We don't need to go too much into details. We don't want to point fingers to anyone, but please continue. Yeah.
No. It's not somebody I play with anymore. Yeah. It's just like a lot of the time with this person, I'll admit you had to kind of just let it play out. Unless he said something really bad or did something really bad, you kind of just let him run out of steam and then pretend it didn't happen. But when he did, there were times where he'd say or do stuff that were properly hurtful, and somebody had to be like, cut it out. Sitting at the table in the moment, like, stop it, shut up, what are you doing? Because
takes the fun out, huh? Takes the fun out. It should be a fun game, actually. Yeah.
Like this person wasn't exactly winning any Nobel Peace Prizes. Sorry, like in real life, they're not.
Yeah, I know what I mean. Yeah.
But then it just to bring it into the game, I suppose.
Yeah.
It will wholeheartedly take the. I'm sure you've heard the expression "bad D&D is worse than no D&D," or something like that. It's like this person at the table is being really mean and making things worse. But at least we're playing the game. Like, just no, at that point, if there's somebody worsening the experience, you need to talk to them about it, right? Like, you can't.
Absolutely.
And that problem did end up getting resolved in its own way, and we don't have any problems with the party we're currently playing with, which is great.
That's great. That's beautiful.
But yeah, so it's just kind of a case of people taking, stuff that's got nothing to do with the game and creating problems in the game about it, like personality differences or what have you. It's not I don't get it, to be honest. It just kind of makes things worse for everyone. I'm not sure there was really any. I'm not even sure I made any sense in that last stretch there. I might have just been rambling.
No. Totally fine. I think it's hard to talk about those things. It's not easy to delve into, especially me putting people on the spot here on difficult topics that some might put somewhere locked away. Don't want to think about it, because, of course, for me, as a master, I'm playing with a lot of groups. I've encountered various things. I play most of the time IRL. I rarely play online. It was during COVID because we couldn't be in the same room where we made. But most of the time, we are all on the table. And so in that case, I'm much more stricter. I actually vet people up front, especially if I have a core player group that I know very well, and I look online for new players in the area where I live here, as Germany, Hamburg, and then we meet. I go out with them for a beer. because I'm pretty upfront about them. I'm pretty clear that this is, yes, we get to know each other. You know what I am, a type of person at DM, and I know what you are, a person. Let's have a beer or whatever, wine or a cup of coffee, whatever they fancy. And because for me as a DM, I feel it's not. I'm not saying now that all the DMs or whoever needs to be responsible, but I feel responsible for the space that I create for my players, not only for the game itself, but also the security to roleplay, because I have a lot of players that really heavily roleplay, voices, act it out. And if I always say we should stream this, but they are I know they will never, some of them even won't come to this podcast because they just want to be in their own space, and that's totally cool. I respect that. But I love, so for me, that is very important. Online, obviously, much harder, right? You can still try a vetting process, but it is harder because I have experienced that a lot of times such a difficult situation if you have players that you need to kick out. That you definitely just need to kick out because it's a very hard place to go, because it should actually be a fun place. And actually, the only thing that we want to roll some dices, right? We want to roll some amazing dices and have a good time with each other. And it's just a sad thing if it's not fitting or gets into an argument all the time. I had once in a while an argument with one player. I think my major one. We just at some point we worked with each other as well, and we got alienated through work. It was very stressful, and then she was also at my table. Everyone felt that me as a DM and she as a player didn't anymore connect. And at some point, we just needed to realize it just doesn't fit together. We both love the game, but the two people, we just don't fit anymore together in terms of playing D&D together. We still can have a drink. The two of us still enjoy the presence of each other, but we couldn't play on the same table. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to realize that.
Would you find as a DM that you'd have more problems with like players being hard on other players, or players kind of giving you trouble for your decisions?
It balances out. It's kind of like both. I think it's 50-50, to be honest. It really depends. I encounter a lot of players who are in the beginning, which don't know me, are maybe not happy with my decision until they know what my kind of like style is about those things. Because for me, it's moving forward. It's not to be right. It's about the situation to forward. And then I'm happy to roll back. I don't mind it, read the rules. But I always find it very immersing breaking when 5 people spend 20 minutes of the session looking in the rule book and online what is now the correct rule. And I find this pretty much, no, let's not do that. I rule it this way. After the session, we can look it up. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, and then we correct it. But the flow of the game, I always feel like it needs to continue. That's my style. It's not about being right or wrong. It's just about my feeling of pace. That I have a feeling if you now dig down that hole about this rule nobody knows about, let's not go there. If it's just a quick, how does this spell work? Whatever, let's look it up.
Yeah.
But if it's kind of like those niche rules, it's like nobody really knows. For instance, sleep. I hate this. I hate the sleep spell. With
the spell,
with how many hit dice everyone has still left. It's like, I always say this is one of the most stupidest rule ever. Everything is saving throws. But it's specifically that one just needs to break the rule for whatever reason, because it's an old rule. It existed already before, but I still will say saving throws, guys. Just saving throws.
Yeah, it's really strange.
That's a really strange one, yeah. And that caused a lot of discussion. That's one of the things where I said, now let's go move on. I do some saving throws. We can read it after. Funny thing is, we read it. Everyone still loves the saving throws. Up until this day, Sleep is with me. Homebrewed, we do saving throws.
Mad. I suppose it doesn't matter what the book says if you and your party are kind of on the same page. You know?
The other side of it, I will say, when it comes between players, that is actually much more harder, because the thing is, I'm now expert in who is right, who is wrong, and sometimes there's a history between the players. Sometimes it happened before the session, it happened after the session. So you kind of like never know. The only thing that I will always say is the minimum that I will take care of is that if the first question is, can you guys resolve it yourself? I will, because a lot of times they have a tendency to come to the master to try to be the mediator. But I will say, go out, have a beer, talk about it. Just go have a coffee with each other, talk about, or a Discord, hang out, talk about it openly. Sleep over tonight and then talk tomorrow, because sometimes when you sleep over it, everything is fine. Everything is not a big deal. If necessary, I will talk to the people, obviously, in person. I will always not try to make a drama on the table at that very time. I will always remind them there's now two options that we can go about. One, we can stop and we can resolve the situation, and then the other people will leave because they don't want to be part of it, right? It's like, go home. Or we agree to a compromise now that we can continue with the game. And then resolve it afterwards, right? Because you always have only two players, and then you have always players that take a side. And you, as a master, you can go to that dangerous place to also take a side.
Dangerous,
but
though,
then you
yeah.
will alienate another part of the group, and it's hard. You need to be Switzerland. Funny, I am from Switzerland, but you need to be Switzerland. It is something that is really hard. But most of the people are reasonable. And here's the point: we are all humans. It will happen. We will have some infighting. We have some disagreements. We will have sometimes feeling that we were personally attacked in RP, which in most cases that might be or not, but we are all humans. And that's the most important thing to always consider. That's just my approach. Sometimes, when somebody has a hissy fit, sometimes in meta or in game, it's like, had a bad day at work. Needs to put it out somewhere.
Yeah. I do find if I'm ever getting in a particularly heated, like, in character argument, I always feel the need to, like, follow up after the session.
Yeah.
And because I've played characters who have huge philosophical differences or constantly butt heads with other characters, but they're being played by one of my best friends in the world or something like that. It's not. I just always feel the need to be like, to kind of follow up afterwards and be like, I'm not actually annoyed at you. It's just he's annoyed at him, sort of a thing. It's like, this is entirely in game, and they're always like, yes, obviously I understand that. I wasn't mad at you. But I'm just always compelled to check.
But that's a good trait, because you never know. Because it's sometimes really hard to see the difference between role playing and not role playing, because sometimes you don't know.
Yeah.
It's not like we are all looking into everyone's brains and know what the other person is thinking. I like that you do that, because you never know. If somebody is personally attacked or if everything is fine.
Yeah, that's fair. I suppose it's better to be safe than sorry, right?
Yeah, well, case in point is you like your guys, right? The guys that you play with. And you would like to play with them a long time.
Yeah.
Because it's a great companion. Well, thing is, the one part is you get to know each other as your characters, but you also need to get to know each other over time, even though you know each other, but everyone grows older. Everyone, has different experiences, sometimes goes through a bad time, a good time in life. That context is important to keep a steady ship of a group and keep it, and everyone is responsible to contribute that this stable ship exists, can grow with each other if you want to play many years together. Otherwise, it will fall apart at some point. People leave, somebody moves away. There's so many things that can be. Good thing is you can play it online, but in the past, if somebody moved away, high chance things break down.
Yeah. True.
Yeah. Awesome. So, Joe, was really great. So I have one thing, if you don't mind to share, maybe. Any advice for new players that you would give looking back to, or what would you tell yourself, your new self?
Suppose it's D&D 5e. I mean, all pen and paper games, but especially, or at least in particular, D&D 5e is kind of intimidatingly big, and there's a lot of things you need to kind of keep track of. But as you sort of get to know the game, you'll find out what you like about it, I guess. So as you go and as you start to discover that, try to hang on to that as much as you possibly can, I guess. Like if you really like the fighting and all of your friends just want to have conversations for hours at a time, that's fine, but you might be better served. Just don't be afraid to go after what you want, because it's supposed to be fun. You got to make sure you're enjoying yourself. And that goes for DMs as well. If you're getting into DMing and you like political intrigue and your party just want to kill everything that moves, maybe you're not running a game for the right people. It's like you say yourself, you've been able, or you've got to be able to draw the line between the game and real life. And if you just want different things from the game, it's not personal. It's not. You need to be able to prioritize what you want, I suppose, because it's a game. It's supposed to be fun, right?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Joe, for being here. This was very insightful.
Yeah, thanks for having me.